Imagine waking up in a place where even the sky feels like it's watching you. A horizon without freedom, a silence so deep it feels rehearsed. In the distance, the faint hum of morning drills echoes across the barbed wire, synchronized footsteps on frozen earth. The guards walk in rhythm, their boots leaving identical imprints in the frost, each mark erasing the individuality of the last. This is not a movie set. This is not a rumor whispered by defectors. This is real. Somewhere beyond the mountains, hidden in the folds of North Korea's northern provinces, lies one of the most secretive places on Earth. A prison camp that officially doesn't exist. Locals call it Kwanliso, a name that translates roughly to control zone. The regime calls it something else, re-education through labor. But those who have seen its gates know what it really is, a slow erasure of human existence, disguised as discipline. From the air, the camp looks like an ordinary valley, trees, hills, a river that glints in the sun. But look closer, and you'll see fences slicing through the landscape, watchtowers standing like frozen sentinels, roads that lead in but never out. The illusion of nature conceals an ecosystem of control. For decades, the North Korean regime has denied that such camps exist, yet satellite images, survivor testimonies, and rare footage smuggled out tell another story. One that defies belief and demands to be told. It's a story about fear turned into architecture, about obedience forged through suffering. Inside these camps, the day begins before sunrise. Prisoners, some guilty of nothing more than having the wrong bloodline, are awakened by sirens. There is no clock, but the body learns the rhythm of command. Work brigades line up in silence, eyes lowered. A single glance out of line can mean punishment, a punishment designed not to hurt, but to break. To understand a North Korean prison camp, you have to first understand what it means to disappear. In this country, guilt travels through generations. If a man is accused of treason, his parents, his children, even his grandchildren can be imprisoned with him. The crime is not the act, it's the association. The regime calls it 3 generations of punishment. A single act of defiance, a whisper of dissent, can condemn a family tree. When defectors describe life inside, their voices tremble not from memory, but from disbelief, that they once accepted such horror as normal. One former prisoner recalled watching his mother beaten for dropping a handful of corn kernels. Another spoke of a boy who smiled during a propaganda song and vanished the next day. No one dared to ask where he went. The guards are not monsters by birth. Many are young soldiers raised in the same system, trained to believe that prisoners are less than human, enemies of the revolution, tainted by bad blood. Indoctrination begins early. Schoolchildren are taught that loyalty to the leader outweighs love for one's family. In such a world, empathy is treason. Outside the fences, the world moves on. Cars hum through Seoul. Tourists snap photos in Tokyo. Planes cross the Pacific, their passengers unaware that beneath the same sky, entire families are vanishing into silence. The camps are hidden not by geography, but by indifference, a collective decision to look away. But let's look closer. Imagine a woman inside one of these camps. Her name doesn't matter. She no longer has one. The guards call her by a number stitched to her uniform. Her hair is shorn, her skin weathered by cold and labor. She was once a teacher in Pyongyang, accused of reading a foreign novel. The novel was about freedom, the punishment, life without parole. Every morning she carries stones from one end of the yard to the other. When asked why, she says nothing. There is no why in a system designed to erase meaning. The camps function like closed societies. Inside, everything is rationed, food, speech, even thought. Rice is replaced with corn husks. Conversations are monitored. Prisoners live in fear not only of guards but of each other, for betrayal can mean survival. Informants are rewarded with an extra handful of rice or a lighter workload. The line between victim and oppressor blurs until morality itself dissolves. The architecture of the camps mirrors the psychology of control. Watchtowers overlook every field. Floodlights sweep through the night like mechanical eyes. Barracks are arranged in grids, built with mathematical precision. Order imposed upon despair. The regime's engineers designed these places not just for containment, but for annihilation of the spirit. Still, Amid the monotony of suffering, life persists. In secret corners, prisoners whisper fragments of old songs. Mothers teach their children to smile without moving their lips. In darkness, they find ways to remember who they once were. One defector said that during a winter night, when the guards were asleep, a group of prisoners huddled together and spoke the word hope. Just once, quietly. The next day, 2 of them were gone. But for that night, they had been free. There are no official records of how many people have died in these camps. Estimates range from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands. Some vanish within weeks, their bodies buried in shallow graves that melt into the soil. Others endure for decades, living ghosts in a country that denies their existence. When escapees speak, they describe a strange emotion, guilt for surviving. The outside world feels unreal, like a dream too bright to believe. Satellite photos confirm what their words cannot. Aerial images show expansions of camp boundaries, new buildings, new roads. The camps are not relics of the past. They are evolving, growing, hidden behind layers of deception and fog. Even the coordinates are erased from public maps. In North Korea, invisibility is the highest form of control. Foreign journalists have tried to expose them. Few have succeeded. Those who get close describe an atmosphere thick with paranoia. Villagers near the zones refuse to speak. Roads suddenly end. Soldiers appear without warning. The land itself seems to conspire with the regime, swallowing truth into the earth. Yet, despite the silence, cracks have begun to form. Over the years, fragments of footage have slipped through, smuggled by defectors, shot with trembling hands. Blurry images of prisoners working in fields overseen by armed guards, children too small to carry tools, dragging stones with bare hands. Grainy night footage of barracks glowing faintly under floodlights. These are not cinematic effects. They are glimpses into a reality that resists comprehension. In one clip, a man looks directly into the camera before the image cuts to black. For a second, his eyes meet ours, a bridge between 2 worlds. You can feel the weight of centuries in that stare. He doesn't speak. He doesn't have to. His silence tells everything. The origins of these camps trace back to the Korean War, when the regime began consolidating power through fear. Political opponents, landowners, intellectuals, anyone considered a threat was sent away. Over time, the system expanded. Loyalty became quantifiable, measured through something called the songbun, a social classification that determines a person's worth. If your ancestors fought for the revolution, you're loyal. If they didn't, you're suspicious. The camps became the logical end of this ideology, physical embodiments of a belief that purity can be enforced by violence. Inside, even nature becomes a weapon. Winters are brutal, summers suffocating. Prisoners work in mines, fields, or factories for up to 16 hours a day. Accidents are common. Medical care is non-existent. Death is routine. Yet funerals are forbidden. When someone dies, others are ordered to keep working. The body is taken away without ceremony. The absence of mourning is the final act of dehumanization. Still, there are moments when the human spirit flickers. A child hiding a pebble shaped like a heart. A guard who looks away instead of striking. A shared glance that says, "We are still here." These fragments of resistance survive like wildflowers in concrete cracks, fragile but impossible to erase completely. The outside world hears about North Korea through headlines and politics, but the reality of these camps is more than statistics. It's a psychological experiment in total control, where fear is currency and hope is contraband. Every rule, every gesture, every punishment is designed to reshape the human mind. Over time, prisoners begin to police themselves. They learn not to think, not to remember. Survival becomes obedience. And yet, somewhere within that silence, there's awareness. A faint realization that the world beyond the fence might still exist. Some have tried to escape. Few have succeeded. The border is surrounded by landmines and electrified fences. Beyond lies a wilderness patrolled by soldiers and hunger. Those who make it past the fence face the vastness of China, another kind of prison, where being found means deportation and certain death. Every escape story sounds like a myth, a man hiding under a pile of coal on a truck. A woman swimming across a river at night with her baby tied to her back. A boy following birds south, believing they knew the way to freedom. Most never make it, but their stories travel, whispered by defectors, carried across borders like forbidden relics of truth. The regime's power lies in its invisibility. It thrives on the world's disbelief. For decades, nations have debated, documented, and denounced, yet the camps remained untouched, expanding. Sanctions come and go, but barbed wire endures. The question is not whether the world knows, but whether it cares. As night falls over the camp, the lights stay on. Floodlights sweep the ground, catching the outlines of motionless figures. Somewhere in the distance, a loudspeaker hums with propaganda music, songs about loyalty, sacrifice, and eternal gratitude to the leader. The melody is soft, almost beautiful, until you realize it's the soundtrack of captivity. From above, the camp seems peaceful. Rows of huts under a cold moon, a quiet river gliding through the valley. But peace is a mirage. Beneath that stillness lies a constant pulse, the heartbeat of fear. Every step, every breath, every sound is regulated. The prisoners are alive but not living, existing but unseen. And yet, within that controlled silence, a question lingers. What happens when a nation builds walls so high it forgets what it's keeping inside? What happens when obedience becomes the only form of survival? Somewhere in one of those barracks, a young boy lies awake. He doesn't remember what the stars look like. The floodlights drown them out. But he dreams of something he's never seen, a world without fences. His heartbeat is steady, his breath slow. Outside, the guards walk by, oblivious to the small rebellion happening inside his mind. The footage that emerged from these camps is rare, fragments stolen from the regime's darkness. They are shaky, blurred, imperfect, but they are enough to prove that the unimaginable is real, enough to remind us that silence too can be evidence. In the end, it's not just a story about prisoners, it's about a country that turned control into a way of life, a place where even freedom has a border, where truth exists only in whispers. And as the first block closes, we're left standing outside those fences, staring at the flickering lights, hearing the distant echo of footsteps. The night is quiet again, too quiet. Somewhere beyond the 38th parallel, a secret continues to breathe. The further you travel from Pyongyang, the more the truth begins to bend. Roads fade into dirt, towns disappear into fog, and the air thickens with something you can't name. A silence that feels deliberate. Somewhere between the mountains of South Hamgyong and the borders of Ryanggang province, civilization fractures. Electricity flickers. Maps stop making sense. This is where the camps begin to exist, not as coordinates, but as absence, places that don't appear on paper, where the lines between state and shadow dissolve. It's said that the first thing you lose inside a North Korean prison camp isn't your freedom, it's your name. A voice calls your number, and in that moment, everything that once defined you, family, faith, identity, is erased. You become a function, a unit in a system that feeds on obedience. Your existence is no longer your own. It belongs to the regime. The structure of control is meticulous, almost scientific. Every camp operates under a hierarchy designed to ensure total dependency. The guards answer to the Ministry of State Security, which answers to a single office in Pyongyang, the Central Party's Department of Social Security. From there, policies flow downward like commandments, efficiency reports are compiled, labor quotas are measured in tons of coal and harvested corn. Even the suffering is quantified. This isn't chaos, it's choreography. Every motion, every punishment, every breath serves a purpose, to maintain the illusion of perfection outside the fence. In North Korea, fear is not a side effect, it's a resource, one that fuels the regime as much as coal or uranium. Propaganda is the bloodstream that keeps this system alive. Inside the camps, prisoners are forced to memorize speeches from the supreme leader, to chant loyalty slogans before meals, to thank him for the food they don't receive. On national holidays, they must bow toward the capital, even if they can't see it. In their exhaustion, in their hunger, They repeat his name like a prayer. Over time, gratitude becomes reflex. Even despair learns to kneel. Outside the camps, the same illusion plays out on a national scale. Television broadcasts show endless parades of soldiers, fireworks, and smiling children. Every frame is perfection, every song rehearsed. Citizens watching from their cramped apartments are told that the nation is strong, united, admired by the world. Meanwhile, the camps, the dark engines that make this illusion possible, continue to operate in silence. What makes the system so unbreakable isn't the strength of the walls, but the architecture of belief. North Koreans are raised to see their leader not as a politician but as a living deity, a father of the nation born under a double rainbow, destined to protect them from evil. This mythology begins in school books and seeps into the soul. To doubt him is not just treason, it's blasphemy. Even prisoners cling to this belief. Some whisper prayers not to God, but to Kim Il-sung, asking for forgiveness. They believe their imprisonment is a test of faith. They believe their suffering has meaning. Indoctrination doesn't vanish behind the fence. It deepens. When the only stories you've ever known are written by your captor, the truth feels like betrayal. The camps themselves are designed as microcosms of the state. There are internal hierarchies among prisoners, squad leaders, work unit heads, informants. These ranks create tension and competition, a perpetual state of mistrust, divide and rule. It's the same principle that governs the entire country, condensed into a few square miles of barbed wire. Guards are trained to see prisoners as contaminants. During their indoctrination, they're told that those inside have committed crimes against the revolution, crimes so vile they threaten the purity of the nation. To show mercy is to risk infection. And so, they don't. They learn to dehumanize with precision. Punishment becomes routine. Beating becomes procedure. One former guard, who later defected, described the process with chilling detachment. He said that when he first arrived, he hesitated before striking a prisoner. His superior noticed and punished him, not for disobedience but for weakness. The next day, he beat twice as hard. He said it became easier with time, almost mechanical. "You stop seeing faces," he said. "You just see rules." The camp is a mirror held up to the nation, a reflection so cruel it can't be acknowledged. The same surveillance that governs the outside world is replicated within the fences. In every barracks, informants are planted, conversations are recorded. Suspicion is constant. A single whisper of discontent can result in public execution. Prisoners are forced to watch as their peers are punished, their deaths serving as lessons. Fear is not only a deterrent, it's education. Beyond physical control, there's psychological manipulation. Prisoners are told that their crimes are hereditary, that their blood is impure, that their suffering is necessary to cleanse them. They are made to believe that freedom is impossible, that even if they escaped, the outside world would reject them. This is perhaps the regime's greatest cruelty, convincing its victims that there is nowhere else to go. The system thrives on invisibility. No international organization has ever been granted full access to these camps. The government calls them labor reform centers. But there are no trials, no sentences, no release dates. Inmates are held indefinitely, their lives suspended between survival and disappearance. Every few years, the regime relocates the boundaries, expanding or shifting camps to new regions to confuse satellite monitoring. Villages are cleared, mountains are mined, and rivers diverted to conceal construction. Entire landscapes are rewritten. It's a kind of cartographic censorship, turning geography into propaganda. In one declassified image taken from orbit, analysts identified a series of long rectangular buildings, each roughly identical in size and orientation. At first glance, they appeared to be warehouses. But thermal imaging revealed constant human heat signatures. The warehouses were barracks. Around them, faint outlines of trenches and walls formed a pattern, an invisible grid of confinement. From above, the design looks almost mathematical. Perfect symmetry, perfect control. But inside, symmetry is chaos. One defector recalled how guards would randomly assign guilt to maintain order. There were no rules, he said, only commands. Punishments varied, from starvation to torture to isolation. Some prisoners were forced to stand motionless for days. Others were buried up to their necks in the dirt. The message was clear. Mercy was not part of the system. Religion is banned, but fragments of faith survive underground. Some prisoners whisper psalms, others repeat Buddhist mantras under their breath. These secret rituals are acts of rebellion, invisible prayers against an omnipresent regime. For many, it's the only form of freedom left. One woman said that during roll call, she would move her lips silently, pretending to recite the loyalty oath. In truth, she was praying. The idea of re-education is central to the regime's narrative. Every punishment, every labor shift, every execution is framed as moral correction. The camps are not presented as prisons, but as purification zones. The goal is to produce reformed citizens, though few ever emerge. In reality, re-education means annihilation. When foreign delegations visit Pyongyang, they are shown model prisons, clean facilities with neat uniforms and well-fed inmates. The real camps, hidden deep in the provinces, are never mentioned. It's a theater of deception, smiles for cameras, silence for the rest, and yet the truth leaks. A handful of escapees have testified before international bodies. Their accounts are eerily consistent, as if describing the same nightmare from different angles. Forced labor, starvation, executions, rape, indoctrination. The details vary, but the structure remains the same, a system engineered for control through suffering. The outside world struggles to comprehend this reality because it defies logic. How can such brutality persist in an age of satellites and smartphones? The answer lies in the regime's mastery of perception. North Korea doesn't hide its cruelty by concealing it. It hides it by making disbelief its ally. When truth sounds impossible, denial becomes convenient. Inside the camps, the language itself is weaponized. Words are stripped of meaning. Work becomes punishment. Correction becomes torture. Order becomes obedience. Over time, the mind adapts. Prisoners stop thinking in absolutes. They live in shades of survival, moments measured in heartbeats, not days. Even the landscape conspires to maintain control. The camps are built in remote valleys surrounded by mountains, natural barriers against escape. In winter, temperatures drop below zero. Rivers freeze solid. The snow records every footprint, making fugitives easy to track. In summer, the air is thick with insects and disease. Nature itself becomes an accomplice. But the most profound revelation is this: the camps are not an aberration. They are the logical extension of the regime's ideology. The same principles that govern Pyongyang, surveillance, hierarchy, devotion, are simply intensified behind the fences. What happens in the camps is not separate from North Korea. It is North Korea, distilled to its purest form. Every speech, every parade, every portrait of the leader owes its perfection to the suffering inside those hidden valleys. Without the camps, the illusion of order would collapse. Fear must have a home, and the camps are its sanctuary. To understand them is to understand the regime itself, a government that turned paranoia into policy, obedience into art. A system where even death is bureaucratic, where the line between punishment and existence no longer exists. One defector once said, "The camp doesn't end when you escape. It stays inside you." Years later, living in freedom, he still wakes at dawn, expecting roll call. He still eats quickly, afraid someone might take his food. He still lowers his eyes when someone in uniform passes by. The camp becomes internalized, a mental geography that never dissolves. And this may be the most haunting truth of all. The prison is not just physical, it's psychological. A nation built on fear doesn't need walls, it breeds them in the mind. Every citizen, whether inside the fence or out, learns to build their own cage. The real footage smuggled out of the camps shows none of this explicitly. It doesn't need to. The power lies in what it implies. The silence between frames, the stillness of faces that refuse to move. You can sense the weight of obedience in every motion, the fear that has no sound. When the video cuts to black, the viewer is left with questions that have no answers. What is it like to live where truth is a crime? How do you measure time when the future doesn't exist? What happens to a society that teaches its people to disappear? The truth is not hidden, it's visible, if you're willing to look long enough. By the time you begin to understand the rhythm of life inside a North Korean prison camp, your body has already begun to forget what it means to be human. Hunger replaces thought, fear replaces language. Days merge into one another until time itself becomes meaningless, a series of commands and silences. The air smells of rust and ash. When it rains, the mud clings to your ankles like another form of captivity. Morning begins before the sun. The first sound is the whistle, sharp, metallic, unmerciful. Prisoners rise in unison, their thin blankets falling away like discarded skin. The barracks are dark, crowded, unventilated. Frost blooms along the walls in winter. In summer, the heat turns the air into a kind of punishment. The guards enter without warning, shouting orders. Those who move too slowly are struck. Those who move too fast are accused of defiance. The first lesson of survival is balance, to exist in motion without being noticed. Breakfast is a handful of corn grits, sometimes mixed with powdered grass. The portions are precise, calculated to sustain life, but not strength. There is no chewing. The food dissolves on the tongue like dust. Prisoners eat in silence, their eyes fixed on the ground. A guard walks the aisles with a stick, watching for anything that might look like defiance. A raised head, a whispered word. A moment of thought. Then comes work. The camp is divided into zones, the mines, fields, construction sites. The assignments depend not on skill, but on punishment. Those who have disobeyed are sent to the mines. Those who are loyal, or appear to be, work the fields. The mines are hell. The tunnels are narrow, the air toxic. Men dig for hours without light, their tools blunt, their hands bleeding. Collapses are frequent. When the walls cave in, the guards do not call for rescue. They mark the day's quota as complete. Above ground in the fields, women bend under the weight of sacks filled with soil and stones. Their backs curve permanently. Children work beside them, their small bodies indistinguishable from the weeds they pull. The sound of picks and shovels merges with the sound of coughing. Dust fills every breath. Sometimes a song drifts across the valley, a propaganda anthem from the loudspeakers that play on loop, praising the leader's mercy. The irony is unbearable. Every movement is watched. Guards patrol the perimeters, their rifles slung across their shoulders. Their expressions are not angry, they are empty. Indifference is their armor. In this place, cruelty is not personal, it is policy. Punishment is constant, but its form varies. There is the standing cell, a space so narrow that the prisoner cannot sit, cannot lie down. Days are spent upright until the legs swell and the mind fractures. There is the kneeling pit and a hole in the ground where prisoners are forced to kneel for hours, their bodies contorted, their skin pressed against gravel until it bleeds. There are public executions, the ultimate theater of obedience. When an execution is announced, the entire camp is summoned. Work stops. Prisoners are herded into the yard, lined in rows. The condemned is brought forward, often bound, sometimes blindfolded. A guard reads the charges, though everyone already knows them. The accused confessed days ago under torture. The crowd is ordered to watch, to cheer, to remember. The shots ring out, the body falls. The silence that follows is more terrifying than the gunfire. Children are forced to stand in the front rows. They learn early that mercy is weakness. Some look away, others don't. It's not courage, it's shock, the kind that calcifies into survival instinct. The younger ones cry, and for that they are punished too. At night, the barracks are filled with whispers, not of rebellion, rebellion is unthinkable, but of memory. A woman hums a lullaby to herself, one she once sang to her daughter before they were separated. A man mutters names he can no longer remember. Someone cries quietly under a blanket. The sound is swallowed by the dark. Even dreams are controlled. Prisoners are told that dreams of escape are signs of impurity. To dream of freedom is to confess guilt. Some force themselves to stop dreaming altogether. Sleep becomes mechanical, a pause between orders. The guards' cruelty is systematic but not always intentional. Many of them are victims too, of indoctrination, of fear. They live in barracks near the camps. Their families provided slightly better food, slightly cleaner clothes. Their loyalty is rewarded with privilege, but they are also watched. Any sign of empathy, Any hesitation in punishment can lead to their own arrest. The regime demands not just obedience but complicity. There is one story told by several defectors of a guard who slipped food to a starving boy. It was a small gesture, a piece of bread hidden under straw. The boy was discovered. He was beaten until he could not stand. The guard was transferred. Rumors say he was later seen among the prisoners. In the camp, kindness is treason. Starvation is both punishment and policy. The human body, deprived of nutrients, becomes docile. Thought slows, emotion fades, hunger replaces rebellion. Prisoners begin to turn against one another, not out of hatred but necessity. A stolen potato can mean another day alive. Morality dissolves in the acid of survival. Some camps experiment with reward zones, where compliant prisoners are given slightly better food or lighter work. The system creates hope and then weaponizes it. Those who strive for promotion begin to inform on their peers. It's a cruel game. Loyalty bought with hunger. In winter, the cold is a weapon too. Temperatures drop to 20 degrees. Blankets are thin, firewood scarce. Frostbite claims fingers, toes, ears. Yet prisoners still rise before dawn to work. The sound of coughing becomes a constant rhythm, a symphony of slow death. When a prisoner dies, the body is carried to a pit outside the fence. There are no markers, no prayers. The dirt is frozen so the graves are shallow. In spring, the ground shifts and bones emerge. Children sometimes find them while digging for roots. They are told not to look. To look is disloyal. Inside the camp, disease spreads faster than rumor. Dysentery, tuberculosis, scurvy. Medicine is reserved for guards. Prisoners use ash to clean wounds, grass to dull hunger. Some drink water from ditches. Others eat rats, insects, anything that moves. The body learns to survive on nothing. Yet even here, within this anatomy of suffering, there are moments of impossible humanity. A prisoner shares his last handful of rice with a stranger. A woman hums an old love song under her breath while cleaning tools. A guard pauses before striking, just long enough for mercy to feel real. These moments are fleeting, but they matter. They are proof that the human spirit resists even when crushed. The psychological manipulation is relentless. Prisoners are told their suffering is righteous, that they are paying for their ancestors' sins. The regime's language is precise. Punishment is purification. Torture is education. Death is redemption. Words lose their meaning. Reality reshapes itself around propaganda. There are children in these camps who were born inside. They have never seen a car, a city, a book. They believe the outside world is a myth, a place invented by traitors. When asked what lies beyond the mountains, one child reportedly said, "The end of the sky." In such a world, ignorance becomes protection. To know too much is dangerous. Those who remember the world before imprisonment suffer more. Memory becomes pain. Forgetting is survival. Defectors speak of the moment they realized they were free, the first time they crossed a river, the first breath of unregulated air. But freedom is not immediate. It arrives slowly like light through fog. For months, some still bow instinctively when hearing authority. They eat too quickly. They sleep sitting up. Their bodies remain disciplined by ghosts. There is one haunting account of a man who escaped, settled in South Korea, and was invited to a dinner party. When offered food, he refused to eat before others began, a habit of hierarchy. When the laughter started, he flinched. When someone raised a glass to toast, he ducked. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. The footage from inside these camps, grainy, incomplete, never captures the full horror. Cameras can record what happens, but not what it feels like. They cannot show the weight of silence, the absence of laughter, the way eyes move differently when hope has been extinguished. And yet, there's something almost sacred in these fragments of evidence. Every pixel, every blurred face, every shaky frame is a testimony against erasure. Proof that even under total control, truth finds a way to exist. When you watch these images, you might feel distance, the comfort of separation. But look long enough and the distance begins to close. The barbed wire fades, and you're left facing something universal, the capacity of power to consume and of people to endure. What happens inside these camps is not confined to North Korea. It's a reflection of what any system can become when fear replaces empathy, when obedience is valued more than truth. The camps are extreme, but they are not alien. They are a mirror, one that forces us to ask what we would do, who we would become under such conditions. And somewhere behind those same mountains, a child still dreams of the end of the sky. He doesn't know what freedom means, but he imagines something beyond the fences, something bright, something that moves without permission. He will grow up not knowing if that dream is real, but even a dream whispered in the dark is a kind of rebellion. To understand what truly hides behind the illusion of order in North Korea, you have to step back from the fences and look toward the cities that are never shown, the forbidden ones. Officially, they don't exist. Yet satellites have traced their lights. They appear in patterns too deliberate to be accidents. They pulse faintly at night, buried deep within the mountains, powered by private grids, invisible to the rest of the nation. These are the secret cities, enclaves of privilege, fear, and quiet decadence. In Pyongyang, the skyline gleams like a lie polished to perfection. The capital is a stage built for the eyes of foreigners, a monument to illusion. The streets are swept, the buildings painted, the citizens rehearsed, but travel beyond its borders, and the facade begins to dissolve. The paint fades, the lights dim, the smiles vanish. The same regime that starves millions also maintains hidden enclaves for the chosen few, generals, scientists, and high-ranking officials who sustain the illusion of power. These cities are protected by secrecy, nourished by suffering. Here, imported goods arrive through black channels, cognac from France, luxury cars from Germany, medical equipment from Japan. While the rest of the country relies on corn husks and powdered roots, the elite dine on beef and rice. Electricity runs 24 hours a day. Streets are patrolled not by soldiers, but by silence. Every apartment is wired for surveillance. Every conversation echoes into the walls. The proximity of comfort to cruelty is staggering. Less than 200 kilometers from the capital, the prison camps operate in perpetual darkness, generating coal and resources that feed these secret cities. The hands that shovel the coal belong to the invisible, the families condemned by lineage, the nameless workers whose bodies become the currency of comfort. The footage that escaped the country reveals glimpses of this paradox. A military convoy carrying boxes of imported wine, passing a line of barefoot farmers. A party banquet filmed in secret, the tables adorned with fruit out of season, oranges, melons, grapes, delicacies that prisoners might only know from propaganda posters. The faces at the table are expressionless, their laughter rehearsed. The wine is poured, the glasses raised, but no one drinks until the portrait of the leader has been toasted. Power, even in pleasure, demands ritual. In one piece of smuggled footage, the camera lingers too long on a mirror. For a fraction of a second, you see the reflection of the cameraman, his face pale, his eyes hollow. Then the image cuts. Some say he was captured soon after. Others say he vanished across the border into China. The truth, like everything in this story, is uncertain. There are rumors of tunnels, vast subterranean networks stretching from Pyongyang toward the northern borders. Officially, they are military supply routes. Unofficially, they are arteries of survival for the elite. When famine strikes or unrest threatens, the leadership retreats underground. These tunnels, built by forced labor, are lined with concrete and equipped with air filtration systems. One defector described them as cities beneath the earth, complete with rooms, weapons depots, even theaters for entertainment. It's said that some of the very prisoners who built these tunnels now lie buried within their walls. The concrete poured too quickly, the exits sealed too soon. Their bones fused with the architecture of power. The irony is impossible to ignore. The dead supporting the living, the oppressed upholding the oppressors. Meanwhile, beyond the barbed wire and the polished capital, another world exists, one even the regime cannot fully control. Along the Chinese border, a shadow economy thrives. Smugglers move goods, information, and sometimes people across the frozen rivers. It's dangerous work. Border guards are instructed to shoot on sight, yet every winter, when the river hardens into glass, footsteps appear across the ice. This underground network is the closest thing North Korea has to resistance. Hidden within its flow are USB drives filled with forbidden knowledge, South Korean dramas, Western news broadcasts, photographs of Seoul at night. To those who have never seen neon lights, these images are revelations. A single flash drive can ignite a revolution of the mind. For the regime, this is the real threat. Not invasion, not bombs, but curiosity. Curiosity is contagious. Once it enters the bloodstream, control begins to falter. This is why possession of foreign media is punished with imprisonment. To watch the outside world is to remember that another life is possible. One of the most chilling aspects of the system is its ability to coexist with modernity. The same government that imprisons children for owning a foreign DVD also launches satellites into orbit. The same hands that operate control panels in nuclear facilities belong to men whose families might be starving. The contrast is not contradiction, it's design. Progress without freedom, technology without humanity. In the capital, scientists work in research centers under portraits of the leaders. They develop weapons, study genetics, and engineer systems of surveillance. Many of them are prisoners too. Intellectuals spared execution in exchange for labor. They live in compounds surrounded by fences, allowed access to books and tools, but denied communication. Knowledge itself becomes a prison cell. Foreign visitors who are granted rare access to Pyongyang are escorted through a maze of performances. They see factories where workers smile on cue, schools where children recite English phrases in perfect unison, hospitals with shiny equipment but no patients. Every scene is carefully choreographed. Every question has a rehearsed answer. The illusion is seamless until you look into someone's eyes. Then you see the truth, a gaze that flickers between fear and calculation, as if measuring how much it's safe to reveal. There is a story told by a defector who once guided such delegations. He said that before each visit, residents were given clean clothes and instructed to practice smiling. Street vendors were hidden. Stray dogs were removed. The illusion had to be total. But one day, as the convoy passed through a district, a small child stepped into the street, barefoot, malnourished, staring. The guards pulled him away instantly. The foreign guests asked nothing. The silence was mutual. The performance continued. Even the weather serves the narrative. On national holidays, rain is forbidden to fall, or so the broadcasts claim. When clouds gather, citizens are told that the spirit of the great leader has cleared the skies. In this way, nature itself becomes a participant in the regime's mythology. Every rainbow, every sunrise, every gust of wind is proof of divine favor. And yet, cracks are forming in the facade. Technology, once tightly controlled, has begun to leak inward. Chinese cell networks bleed into the northern provinces. USB drives cross the rivers. News travels in whispers. Some North Koreans now carry smuggled phones hidden beneath floorboards, using them to call relatives across the border. Each call is an act of defiance, a reminder that connection still exists beyond the walls. The regime responds with ferocity. Signal detectors roam the countryside. Those caught making unauthorized calls are arrested, interrogated, sometimes executed. But the flow of information is unstoppable. Like water through rock, it finds a way. There's something haunting in the way truth moves here, slowly, invisibly, through fear. Each fragment of knowledge becomes a weapon, each word an act of rebellion. And behind every risk taken, there's a quiet understanding. No one escapes alone. Some of the most shocking footage ever smuggled out of the country came from within its borders, filmed by the very people who once believed in the system. Secret videos of executions, markets, border patrols, even the camps themselves. These images weren't meant for the world. They were meant for proof. Proof that the invisible is real. Proof that silence can be broken. Watching this footage feels like trespassing. You see the faces of guards who think they are unseen, the faint outlines of prisoners in fields, the distant sound of a hymn carried by wind. You begin to realize that this is not just documentation, it's confession. A nation confessing through stolen images what it cannot say aloud. There are even rumors of internal resistance among the elite. High-ranking officers disillusioned by what they've seen. Diplomats who quietly smuggle information to foreign journalists, scientists who falsify data to protect civilians. Their rebellion is invisible. Their names erased, but their actions ripple through the system like quiet earthquakes. The truth is spreading, even within the walls. The illusion is cracking, one whisper at a time, and yet the cost of truth remains unbearable. For every defector who escapes, others vanish. Families are punished, villages erased. The three-generation rule ensures that guilt is contagious. One person's courage becomes another's sentence. The regime sustains itself not only through fear, but through the manipulation of love. What greater control can there be than to make a person choose between freedom and the lives of their children? Still, some choose freedom. They cross rivers under moonlight, wade through barbed wire, hide in forests. Their footsteps leave trails of hope for others to follow. Every escape is a story of impossible odds, but also a testament to endurance. And every image, every testimony that reaches the outside world adds another fracture to the wall of lies. The truth, though small, is cumulative. It gathers weight, pressure, inevitability. The regime cannot silence what has already been seen. In the end, exposure doesn't come from satellites or foreign intelligence. It comes from within, from the quiet defiance of those who refuse to forget, who risk everything to make sure the world remembers. Behind every blurred video and every whispered story, there's a message carved in silence. We are here. We exist. Don't look away. Night falls differently in North Korea. It isn't the kind of night that invites rest or reflection or the comfort of darkness. It's a night that feels like a ceiling, heavy, low, deliberate. When the last floodlights dim around the camps and the factories go silent, a stillness settles over the valleys. It is so complete that even the wind seems to hesitate. If you could stand there, see on the edge of one of those ridges where barbed wire meets horizon, you would hear the faint hum of a generator, the distant barking of a dog, and beneath it all the steady rhythm of a nation breathing in unison, afraid to exhale too loudly. For outsiders, the story of North Korea ends with what is seen, the footage, the testimonies, the statistics. But inside, for those who have lived it, the story never ends. It continues in the body, in the reflexes, in the silence that lingers long after escape. There is a kind of haunting that doesn't come from ghosts, but from memory itself. The muscle memory of fear, the conditioned instinct to look over one's shoulder, the urge to bow before speaking. Those who escape describe a strange confusion when they first experience freedom. The noise of traffic in Seoul feels unbearable, the brightness of neon too harsh, the abundance of food overwhelming. Some weep in grocery stores, others freeze at the sound of laughter. It takes time to understand that noise can be harmless, that abundance isn't a trap. Freedom must be relearned like language, slowly, painfully, one syllable at a time. For every defector who tells their story, there are hundreds who never will. Some because they did not survive, others because they carry the weight of those who didn't. Survivor's guilt, the invisible sentence that outlasts the camps. It manifests in dreams, in silence, in the inability to be fully present. Freedom is not always liberation. Sometimes it is another kind of exile. One defector, years after escaping, said he still couldn't sleep in a soft bed. The mattress felt deceptive, unsafe. He preferred the floor, cold, solid, predictable. Another said that when he hears people argue about politics, he feels something close to panic. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "You've never seen what politics can become." Perhaps the most painful realization is that the world keeps turning. The global headlines move on. New crises replace old ones. The images of the camps become archived documentaries. The names of the prisoners fade into reports. And yet, somewhere beyond those mountains, the fences are still there. The lights are still on. The guards still walk their rounds. The silence remains intact. It is this continuity, this endlessness, that defines North Korea's power. The regime doesn't need to convince the world of its strength. It only needs to convince its people of their isolation. And isolation has become a national religion. To question it is blasphemy. To escape it is treason. The paradox of the modern world is that information has never traveled faster, yet ignorance remains convenient. The camps exist not because the world is unaware, but because awareness without action is another form of silence. Watching becomes a kind of complicity. The line between witness and bystander blurs, and so the question arises, what does it mean to look? To truly look, not as a spectator, but as someone who recognizes that what they are seeing implicates them. The footage of the camps isn't just an artifact of cruelty, it's a mirror, a reminder of how fragile civilization becomes when fear is institutionalized and empathy is criminalized. Every dictatorship begins with the same architecture: control of speech, control of truth, control of memory. North Korea simply perfected the blueprint. The walls there are not only made of concrete and wire, but of words, carefully chosen, repeated until belief replaces thought. When language itself becomes a weapon, freedom begins with silence. But silence can only last so long. Eventually, even the smallest whisper becomes deafening. In interviews, defectors often speak softly, as if the act of telling might summon danger. Some pause mid-sentence, their eyes distant, their bodies tensing. You realize they are still calculating the cost of speech. They are free, yet freedom still feels conditional. The camp lives within them, not as a place but as an echo. One woman described her first day in freedom. She crossed into China after days of hiding in the forest. The river was half frozen. Her clothes were soaked. On the other side, someone gave her a bowl of hot soup. She lifted the spoon, but before tasting it, she looked around, waiting for permission. No one spoke. Only then did she cry. Not because she was free, but because she realized she didn't know how to be. That moment, she said, was the hardest truth, that freedom without understanding is its own kind of prison. In Seoul, Tokyo, New York, the cities where the world debates politics and policy, North Korea becomes abstraction, a topic, a statistic, a geopolitical puzzle. But for those who have seen the camps, it's not an abstraction, it's a scar that doesn't fade. It's the smell of burned coal in the air, the memory of snow mixed with ash, the feeling of eyes always watching. It's a reminder of what happens when humanity is replaced with obedience. There's a phrase some defectors use, the country of whispered names. It refers to how people inside North Korea speak of those who've vanished. You don't ask directly. You don't say, "Where is she?" You whisper the name at night and listen to the silence that follows. If no one answers, you already know. That silence stretches far beyond the borders of the DPRK. It reaches us, those who live in the comfort of freedom, and demands an answer. How many whispered names can the world ignore before silence becomes the language of the civilized? The footage of the camps, the testimonies, the satellite images, they are fragments of an ongoing plea. They don't ask for pity, they ask for remembrance, for refusal to look away. Because the moment the world forgets, the fences win. In a rare act of defiance, one defector returned to the Chinese border years after his escape. He stood on the riverbank at night, staring at the mountains of his homeland. He said he could see faint lights flickering on the horizon, the outline of guard towers. He whispered to them, not in anger but in mourning. "I am still one of you," he said, "but I cannot come back." Then he threw a small lantern into the water and watched it drift downstream, its flame trembling against the current. It was perhaps the most honest kind of protest, one that asks for nothing but acknowledgement. The truth about North Korea isn't only in what it hides, but in what it reveals about the rest of us, about the human capacity for denial, about how easily freedom can be taken for granted, about how control, once normalized, can grow in any soil. The camps are not a relic of history, they are a warning written in the present tense. If you listen closely to the testimonies, to the recordings smuggled out under threat of death, you can hear something beyond pain, a strange, fragile kind of hope. It doesn't sound like optimism. It sounds like endurance, the refusal to disappear completely. Even in the camps, people found ways to sing, to share, to dream. Hope, in that context, is not a feeling. It's defiance. There is a scene described by multiple survivors. On certain nights when the guards were distant and the wind was still, prisoners would gather near the fence and look toward the mountains. They would not speak. They would simply stand and stare as if waiting for something, a sound, a signal, a miracle. None came. But still, They looked. That, perhaps, is what survival means in such a place. The courage to keep looking toward what you cannot see. Today, the camps still breathe, the propaganda still plays, the borders still hold. But the world is changing around them. Information seeps in like water through cracks, and every whisper, every secret, every act of unseen courage brings the wall closer to collapse. When the fall finally comes, as all walls eventually do, it may not arrive with explosions or speeches. It will come quietly, like dawn over the mountains. The floodlights will flicker, the guards will hesitate, and for the first time in generations, the silence will break. And somewhere a child who once dreamed of the end of the sky will step forward and see it for the first time, endless, bright, and without fences. Until that day, all that remains is witness. To remember, to tell, to refuse indifference, because silence is the regime's most faithful accomplice. And truth, no matter how faint, no matter how buried, is its most dangerous enemy.